Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Steven Haggerty. Today I'm joined by the founder and CEO of easyGuide, Blake Reddy. How are you today, Blake?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for being on. Super excited to have you on the show. And I guess let's just, as I say every time it seems at the moment, get this ball rolling with a little bit of an explanation of what easyGuide is, what you guys do over there, and then we can get into the nitty gritty story bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So easyGuide, hopefully the name and also the branding you can kind of recognize, which links with easyJet. So obviously, yeah, the big bright letters and orange background and whatnot. So for us, we focus purely on selling tickets to things like attractions, activities, experiences, tours, and theatre shows. We're now in, I think, over 50 cities around the world. And our goal is really to leverage the brand and all of the customers that sort of use and recognize easyJet to fulfill what people really want to do when they reach a destination, which is, yeah, sort of all those things I mentioned.
Fantastic. I mean, you were obviously in investment banking beforehand, or investment management. Sorry. What was going on in your world when this came up and this idea formed for you, and obviously the partnership with the Easy Group? How did that come about, and how was that for you in terms of the switch?
Yeah, so it sounds like a bit of an unusual switch, which I guess it kind of is. There's not many similarities between the two. Um, But in terms of my background, I went to Cass Business School when I was younger, and that's when I first met Sir Stelios. He's the founder of easyJet and Easy
Hmm.
Group. He was my mentor since then, so since sort of 2012, so quite a long time now. So that was sort of the initial connection with Stelios and the Easy Group. And then in terms of actually making sort of the move from finance into travel, it was more of a case of identifying what I think is a good opportunity in the space, trying to leverage that connection with Stelios and the brand that I had, and really trying to fill this gap where so typically your typical customer with EasyJet would land in let's say they landed London as an
Hmm.
example, and that's really where the customer journey ends with the brand. Um, but in reality, when everyone flies into London as a tourist, they're not coming here just to sit on the beach or anything. They're coming here to do stuff. They're coming here to go to the museums, galleries, go to the London Eye, Madame Tussauds, and whatnot. So
Yeah.
for me, it made complete sense to try and offer these customers um, all of those products, and that's what we're trying to do.
Amazing. I mean, I'm curious to get the understanding from you as well in terms of obviously your mentorship from Sir Stelios. For you, was did you always want to have a business with him? Did you Was that always in your plan, or is this kind of just come up organically and then a natural fit through the mentorship, and obviously the opportunities that arise from that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's quite a privilege to have him sort of well, to be associated with him. So there's always opportunity in my head that I wanted to do something. Wasn't sure what it was, but
Just
yeah,
something.
definitely wanted to make the best of the opportunity. Um, yeah, I think it was just more of a case of when the idea presented itself, then I actually presented it to Stelios. And to start with, I wasn't aware that we could actually use the brand.
Okay.
So I pitched him this idea that we'd have this platform that would cover all the cities around the world, and it would enable people to sort of view live availability and get instant mobile tickets to enter these places. Um, and then when I pitched him that idea, he then sort of well, he told me that we can actually try and do this with the Easy brand as well. Um, so yeah, once
He's
he
like,
told me
welcome to the
that,
family.
yeah, pretty much. So once he told me that, then I was sort of yeah even more keen to really sort of
Mm.
take the next step and give it a go.
And do you think having a really successful and impactful parent company behind you has not only helped the brand itself but also your switch into that role as a founder, because obviously beforehand in investment management, this is a new identity for you, I guess. How has that been for you in terms of a learning curve in that role?
Yeah, it has. I would say it has more. pros and cons, but there are definitely both. So I suppose on the con side, when you talk to people, they automatically assume that you're a big company with sort of almost unlimited budget behind
Yeah.
you, which when you're a startup is quite a frustrating conversation
Mm.
because it's just not quite the reality of it. Um, so people do get that misconception sometimes from day one. But as I say, the pros definitely outweigh that, and the pros are anything from people that we hire, they automatically recognize the brand. They assume again that we're probably a fairly healthy company with sort of good support behind us. So that
Yeah.
helps with the recruitment. Similarly, when we enter the sector, we had a lot of partners, other companies who want to work with us from day one. So typically, if we didn't have the brand and if we were just sort of an average startup, for instance, it would have been a lot harder for us to partner with all these companies that we work with.
Mm.
So trying to form relationships with historic royal palaces in London, as an example, that would have been a far more difficult conversation if they'd never heard of us. But given the fact we have this brand, they automatically recognize. They're keen to have these conversations from day one. So that those sort of
Super
things really help.
exciting as well for you.
Yeah, I
Must.
think it is. It's been a journey so far. So we started the company January last year. We launched the initial platform in August last year. But since over those months and even up till today, even through COVID, it's been a journey with a lot going on, whether it's fundraising, marketing, recruitment,
Fun.
and everything. Yeah.
I love it. It's been a really interesting conversation with people this year because obviously COVID, and especially when they've launched last year or late last year. How was it for you when, February time this year, kind of, let's face it, shit hit the fan a little bit in the UK and in the world? As a founder of a young startup, even with, like we said, even with like the support of the background, you're still a raw startup, which is really interesting to find out that as well. But how was that for you in terms of just being able to go, right, let's deal with this, let's go into a sort of obviously a solution based mode? How was that? What did you do with the team? What did you do with yourself? How did you manage that?
So I guess at that sort of point in time, it was pretty clear about what's going on in the world for our sector anyway. It was pretty black and white that it was going to get pretty bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, the initial response for us and same for anyone in our sector would have been, well, I think anyway, just to cut the overheads down to as little as possible.
Yeah.
So again, we have a few benefits there. We had the fact that we get very heavily discounted office space because of the Easy Group. Equally, as a startup, our overheads in terms of payroll and things are fairly limited anyway. So it's not as if we have hundreds of people on payroll that we have to be supporting. So yeah, we had to cut all of the fat, I suppose. So things like marketing costs went straight back down to zero. There's no point investing into marketing
Yeah.
during these periods. So it was frustrating, but I think we were quite fortunate in the sense that we raised money a couple of times last year.
Mm-hmm.
We actually raised money in February this year, and we also raised money again during the initial lockdown as well. So we were in a fairly healthy position financially,
Fantastic.
which sort of alleviated some of the stress. But yeah, I think the most frustrating thing is just we have to be very patient and just there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do about it. We can't just force something to happen. We just have to sort of patiently wait for the world to resume and get
And
back to some sort of normality.
are you a patient person? Because again, this is a trait with founders that they want something done now. They can see what the benefit of patience is, but it's that, I guess it's quite hard to describe, but I guess it's that like internal feeling of just wanting to see, obviously it's your baby as well, isn't it, the business, and you want to see it prosper, you want to see people using the services, you want to see that growth. How did you handle the patience? Are you good with that, or is this something you had to sort of adapt with?
It's incredibly tough. Yeah. I mean, as a startup, you're looking at metrics on a daily basis and you're having to tell people about your weekly growth rates and things like that. So when you're having to be patient, it's let alone for almost well, it's gonna be over a year in the end, isn't it? So
Yeah,
yeah,
crazy.
it's incredibly difficult, but there's nothing we can do about it. There are things to keep us busy. So when things kicked off early in the year, we were just in London as our first city. Now we're in over 50 cities around the world.
Amazing.
So there was quite a big leap forward on that front. And that was made possible because we had the resources, but also the time available just to commit to this rather than having to sort of focus on growth rates and things like that. So there was one benefit there. And now we are focusing purely on sort of generating organic content, which doesn't have much use today, but it will have use in sort of 6, 12 months time.
Yeah.
So that's what we've really been focusing on during this quieter period.
Doing a future self a favor. That
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
In terms of you personally, then, how do you what's your routine? How do you make sure that you're motivated to work? How do you make sure that you're turning up every day in the office and making sure that you're on it? You're inspiring. You're helping the team. What's your system for that?
Yeah. I mean, I must admit it is tough with lockdown in place and everyone working virtually. It is quite difficult to keep that sense of routine. For me, I still come into the office just because I find it's a quiet and more sort of work oriented place to be. So I still come into the office, and that helps, I think. Making sure we still start the day at a certain time with fixed sort of conference calls and Zoom calls and whatnot. And just making sure we're doing everything we need to be doing on a daily basis. So if we are trying to produce X number of pieces of content on a daily basis or weekly basis, we make sure we're still hitting those targets.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose instead of focusing on sort of growth rate and those sort of KPIs, we're now focusing on the things that we can be doing. Yes, like generating blog posts and whatnot.
It's a really interesting learning phase, I think, for a lot of people at the moment in terms of how they're running their business, what works, what's not. And I think many founders this year especially have learned actually they can do things a little bit differently than perhaps they have done for the last 5 or so years, and it works really well. In terms of environment then, because you've got Sir Stelios as a mentor. Who else inspires you? Who else do you look up to, or you can lean on when perhaps you need the support as well? Because again, as a founder, we're there to support our team and support customers and clients. But as you know well and true, it's like you need the support just as much as anyone.
I mean, being especially a solo founder, it can be a fairly isolated experience.
Yeah.
You can't lean on the people sort of working for you. And so, yeah, sometimes it can just be an isolating experience. Sometimes there is no one to really lean on. But equally, I think, well, maybe specifically I'm talking about the sector where I'm in today, but I'm often getting approached by other people who are running companies, and they're more than happy to talk and offering advice where they can, whether it's just going for a coffee and chatting or whatever it may be. There was, as an example, the CEO and founder of one of our largest competitors. They have Airbnb as a significant investor. He invited me over to Amsterdam just to sort of have a good meeting and catch up, and we go for dinner occasionally. So I think even if you're competitors in the same space, you can still sort of help each other to a certain extent, just whether it's talking things through and just sort of being there for each other, because we all know it's a difficult journey.
I guess you're both going through the same struggles as well, so you can completely relate on that side of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it can be isolating, but I think if you make the effort to reach out to people and sort of invite people in, then there is a support network. And especially with sort of London-based startups, that we have great communities here.
Yeah.
So again, if you make the effort, you can go to sort of meetups. You can have people there to talk to, and sort of even if you're not in the same sector or anything, you have similar experiences and difficulties to talk to. So that helps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a big question, or not a big question, but why do you do what you do? What are you doing it all for? What's your sort of end game for yourself? Because I think with a lot of founders, we think in quite short-term basis, don't we? We think like next 12 months, next 3 years. For you, where do you want to see sort of the easyGuide company go? And what's your game plan for that?
Yeah, so me as a person, I think I'm not exactly sure why, but I've always had this mindset that I wanted to to build something and create something of my own. So even in back in sort of finance, when I was working in investment management, I actually started my own investment management firm and with a co-founder, and we grew that over a few years. So I've always had this mentality of wanting to try and start something and grow it myself, and that's very much the case here as well for easyGuide. So we have been delayed by probably a year at least now, but yeah, very much the goal for me is to try and scale over the course of next year, realistically over the summer months and Q3, Q4, and build it up into a sizable company that we can eventually exit and maybe hand over to someone else. But yeah, the main motivation and passion for me is just sort of building things from scratch and trying to scale it. Yeah.
What part of the business growth do you enjoy most? Because some people love like the real startup-y, bootstrappy days. Other people like the sort of middle growth phase, building the teams, building the culture. And then other people obviously love like the exit phase where you're discovering that next new thing. For you, have you got a certain area that you just thrive in?
Well, I think most people probably love the part where they think of the idea and they really start putting pen to paper and getting it off the ground. I mean, there's nothing better than building the framework of something. So I think that's, for me, that's always very exciting. And then from there, I guess it's really when you start to see things come together. Proof of concept, the technology being built, investors coming in and supporting you with their capital, and making those first hires. So I think the whole journey is very exciting.
Exactly. Do you suffer from the classic shiny object syndrome?
In what sense?
In the sense where you're obviously in a position where you're probably seeing a lot of opportunities at the moment, and seeing potential ways that you can spend your time. Do you often still have that thought of like, oh, actually, maybe I could do that as a little side thing or anything like that? Which again, super common in just entrepreneurial mindset where I don't think I've met a single entrepreneur that truly focuses on one thing for a significant period of time.
Yeah, it's true. Well, yeah. Speaking for myself, there's probably 3 ideas at the moment I'm running.
Always, it's when you're falling asleep and the iPhone notes pops up and you're like, okay, I need to write this down.
Almost always, and even on holiday, I think on holiday there's always one idea that pops up.
Yeah.
But I think that's the beauty of sort of seeing things and traveling and exploring, as you see how things are done elsewhere and maybe the improvements that could be made. And as an entrepreneur, when you see those sort of things, you try and find a solution.
Exactly.
And yeah, take it from there.
And that you'll find it's one of those things that in like a couple of years' times, you'll go back over your notes, you'll see an idea, and you'll be like, now it's the time I can do something with that. Which is again that entrepreneurial thing that we just all have. For you, what's next for the easyGuide group? You kind of mentioned it earlier, but 2020 is almost a write-off for a lot of companies, especially in your sector. How do you plan to not pull yourself out of this, but how do you plan to just move on to the next step whenever that next step can start to happen, hopefully early next year? Have you got sort of a plan in place perhaps that you didn't have before and has grown differently over having that extra time that you mentioned to sort of work on the business?
Yeah, well, we're quite fortunate in the UK, I think, because I think the government's been pretty supportive for companies, including ourselves. So there's the government Kickstart scheme, which launched at the beginning of November.
Yeah.
I suppose for those who haven't heard of it, the Kickstart scheme is to battle, to help those who have been negatively impacted by COVID in terms of their career and prospects between the ages of 18 and 24. And they are enabling companies like us and other companies to recruit these people and give them sort of 6-month contracts. So for us, we're in the middle of hiring these people. We're looking to get a team of sort of 30 people together from this, and they'll all be focusing on sort of generating organic content. So
Amazing.
Blog posts to cover, as I mentioned, we're in sort of over 50 cities around the world. So there's a lot of content they can be focused on writing. So that's been one thing that's really come from this, I suppose. And we want that to quite significantly change the traffic that comes to easyGuide. Before COVID, it was a lot of paid advertising and fairly little organic traffic. Going forward, for probably the near term, we're going to focus more on organic traffic rather than paid.
make that switch.
Yeah.
Bringing on 30 people, that's an amazing achievement, just to obviously help out those people in itself. But it's also breeds, what sort of culture you wanting to build, what sort of environment do you want these 30 people to step into when they join the easyGuide company. Have you thought about that? Have you thought, and actually on a flip side, I'm curious to know, are you restricted by anything because of the parent group, or are you allowed to just kind of do what you want?
So we're all separate companies, so we're all run individually.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can do whatever we want. In terms of sort of the culture in the company, that comes purely down to us as the company.
Nice.
And to be honest, I guess it's a case of that's going to be a flexible situation, because we don't really know exactly how things are going to look when we hire sort of quite a big team like that.
Yeah.
Especially in days where quite a lot of work is going to be done virtually as well.
Mm.
So hiring a team to work from home from day one is going to be something very new to me. So it's going to be.
Are you pro virtual, or do you like having sort of the team next to you, the team in the office, and having that? Because there is definitely a different buzz when you have everyone in the office. There's different conversations that you have that you just can't have virtually. But likewise, virtually breeds, different motivations for employees, and often they actually work more in some cases.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some middle ground going forward for the long term. I don't think that it's essential that everyone's in the office all day, every day. I think there's a lot of time wasted for commuting and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But equally, there's a lot of merit for people being in the same room together. So in an ideal world, when we're allowed to, I would probably like to have everyone in the office maybe half the week, and then they can sort of work from home and really focus on the things that they've got to do from the comfort of their own home as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that's going to be really interesting to watch from other companies and other startups. Just how are they going to find that balance? Because there is that balance, especially in the startup world, where having that creativity in the room together on more than once a week is definitely going to be beneficial, which is very exciting. I guess my final question for you, Blake, is how can people find out more about easyGuide? How can people follow your journey as well? Because you're at that I love the phase you're at right now, where it's like, I feel like you're sort of the horses before the race. You're itching to get going, and you're about to be released next year, and just absolutely smash it.
Yeah, I mean, we try and keep people up to date on LinkedIn primarily for those sort of things. Quite often there are PR pieces as well. We were named the UK Startup 100 company a few months ago. So all these sort of things are out there, I suppose, for anyone who does want to follow the journey. And yeah, I think it'd be an interesting one. We're launching a new platform in a couple of weeks in time for Christmas. And then, hopefully it's not too long into next year before we can really see travel resume a bit more regularly.
I have no doubt it will happen. Again, it's just that when it will happen, isn't it? It's must be super frustrating, but you're hanging in there. You're doing well.
Yeah, I think one thing if people really miss the most from lockdowns is the ability to travel and explore. So,
although it seems like everybody I know at the moment is just in Dubai. So
me too. Yeah.
Every man and their dog is just in Dubai. I don't know why. But Blake, listen, thank you so much for coming on Founders 365. Thanks for sharing the story of easyGuide, and I will personally be looking forward to just seeing how you guys do in the growth. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone else for watching and listening. This has been Founders 365.